Welcome to the Swamp. We're diving into a survival game that drops you out of orbit and into a random planet and says, good luck. Icarus promises realistic survival, environmental danger, and crafting under pressure. But is it worth the grind, or is it just another build a base and die in a storm simulator? Well, let's find out. My name is Excalligator, and I review games using a category-based system built for survival, open world, and RPG titles. Each category is rated on a scale from 1 to 5, and if something doesn't apply to a specific game, it will not affect the overall score. Now, let's get started. So Icarus is kind of weird. There are a couple of different play styles that the game seems to have, but what I'm gonna go with is that it is a session-based survival game, kind of. Though you don't have to play in sessions, it can be one continuous survival game experience if you wanted it to. And in different modes, sometimes you will not be building a permanent home, you'll be dropped onto the surface, given a mission and a timer, and when it runs out, you either escape or you lose your character permanently. Though in the traditional survival session like I played, you'll still get your mix of classic survival mechanics, food, shelter, crafting, with a heavy emphasis on preparation and risk management. The character creation isn't too much to brag about. You can change your face and a few minor features, but you all pretty much wear the exact same spacesuit. You can kind of change the color, and then later in-game, you know, with the crafted armor you make, will layer that on top of your spacesuit. But other than that, pretty much every character looks the same, as kind of just a generic astronaut, no matter what you pick. There also seems to be a disconnect between the character saves and world saves, so you can play any character in any world, which is convenient, and it's not really the first game to do that, but it is something that more and more games are starting to do, and I do like it. Overall though, it is pretty limiting, uninspiring, so I'm gonna have to rate the character creation a 2 out of 5. Now, as I said before, Icarus will offer a few different modes. You can have time extraction missions, survival mode, and a couple of DLC maps with their own variations, which I did not purchase, so any of the DLC stuff I'm not really going to be able to talk about, but for my playthrough, I chose just the basic survival mode on the default map, which is called Olympus. Now, you can pick your starting location, which actually sets the tone for your entire run. Some areas are more forgiving, while others are downright brutal. Once you land, your game basically says, figure it out. There's not really any real tutorial. You're told to build a contact device for missions, but it's locked behind level 10, and leveling up takes quite a while. So for the first few hours, you're going to be just grabbing sticks, rocks, and crafting what you can by hand, slowly unlocking technology as you go. It's survival in its purest form, but the pacing is rough, especially with no guidance and a lot of grinding. A lot of parts of the early game, and even with the limited story content, you're also locked behind DLC for some things, so yeah, I didn't really enjoy the start of this experience, especially because of something else I'll, say later on, but I'm gonna give it a 2 out of 5, mostly just for the pacing and lack of tutorial. Now, because I don't have the DLC, I'm only going to be talking about the Olympus map. So, the Olympus map features 3 main biomes. You have forest, desert, and snow. Each of them have about 2 versions in different locations on the map. The wildlife can change depending on where you go. So, for example, in the center snow biome, which is a more mid-level area, you'll have wolves, while the southern snow biome, you can have high-level ice bears or polar bears that will pretty much just one-shot you. The biomes look visually great, but the world feels strangely empty. There are no ruins, villages, points of interest to discover, not even just, ruined satellites or stuff that you could just find. It's really just open terrain with resource nodes. Now, the resource nodes are quite diverse, so I did have a lot of fun finding out all the different flora in the various areas, from coffee to tea, and all these different types of fruits and vegetables you can find, as well as herbal remedies. Now, there are some caves, but most of them are just tiny resource pockets rather than explorable networks. On the plus side, the fauna and flora variety is solid. The animals do spawn dynamically, thank God for that, and they do change each session, which means you'll encounter new threats in familiar places. Later on, once you build the contact station, you can take on missions that generate temporary outposts or objectives, giving you something to chase, even if those sites become useless after the completion of that quest. Though something I really like about the world are the storms. The storms are a standout mechanic, and the weather isn't just visual, it's dangerous. You'll face anywhere from light green wind storms, as I'll call them, all the way to stronger yellow and red tiered ones. Now, what I mean by that is there are different tiers of these storms. You can have from tiers 1, 2, 3, and I believe it goes up to about 4 or 5 if I'm correct about that. And then from there, as the storm happens, there will be a lighter as it's, building up, where not much is going to happen. It's kind of raining, but then as it progresses in its severity, you'll see it go from yellow to red severity, which in that case, you will start taking damage, and not just you, but your buildings. Now, depending on the type of buildings that you have, they will take damage from different leveled storms. So obviously, the higher tier building pieces that you have, they'll take less damage from the weaker storms. But these are also randomized, completely RNG, so you could be, freshly starting on the map, and you'll get a tier 4 storm, which will knock out your entire base. You'll probably see footage of me just kind of rapidly repairing my base as it's all falling around, around me. And now, other than that, for the exploration, you can also tame animals and use them as mounts, which massively improves the travel system, especially because the world layout feels more like long corridors and hallways rather than wide open landscapes, and it feels like it could take forever just to get from point A to point B, so having that mount is crucial. Now, what I was talking about in the previous section that I didn't like about the early game was you can theoretically tame any creature at any level, but you cannot ride them until level 10, where you unlock the workshop, and from extension off to that, you get all the different types of workbenches, including ones to make the saddles. But you also cannot make the food trough and the water trough until then as well. So I tamed up this horse, and I didn't really have a way to give it water, so it was dehydrated and slowly dying until I quickly ground up enough levels to finally give it water. And if you're wondering if you're someone who's played the game before, no, I didn't have a water vessel at the time. I found one after the fact. So that would have been nice to have had, but I didn't have anything to give it water until after that. I was level 7 when I tamed the horse, so yeah, grinding up those 3 levels took an hour, 2 hours, and the poor freaking creature was just dying of starvation and thirst until I could get that. But yeah, anyway, now I'm done with that little rant there. We've got a score of 3 out of 5 for the exploration. I do like, the fauna and flora of the world. I do like the storm mechanics. I don't like how empty the world itself feels, though, without the exploration. And I don't like how the various areas just feel like narrow hallways rather than, wide open landscapes. The survival in Icarus is pretty basic. You of course need to keep your food and water gauges up, but there is now a third one, which is oxygen. Now, food is very easy. You have to eat food and then you fill up your hunger. Water, on the other hand, you can get from pretty much any water source, but if it is not a cleaned water source, there is a chance you could get parasites. It is not guaranteed, so it is more than likely you can drink the water if you're in a tight spot, but you want to try to stick to the clean water as much as possible, whether it be from rainwater or purified. Now then, oxygen you get from a mineral called oxite. You can either just eat the ore as is, which I don't know how that works, but it just turns into oxygen for you. Or you could put it into a device that will maximize the oxygen output for you, so you don't have to use as much oxite as you would if you just eat it raw. There are injuries you have to look out for, as well as some diseases. You can get broken limbs and infections, which are all fixable with crafted medicine and bandages. None of them are instant death mechanics like you would see in Green Hell, but they do keep you on your toes from time to time. It's simple enough to learn, but deep enough to feel rewarding when you plan ahead. So for that, even though this section is small, I'm gonna give it a 4 out of 5. Solid survival mechanics that strike a good balance between realism and fun. The building is pretty standard. While you can craft a lot of things in your hand or your inventory, some of it you'll have to craft from various workshops, but you will need plenty of space to fit all of your crafting stations, which are pretty much required for progression. Now, I already talked about the storm system, how it can and will destroy your base if your walls and foundations are not strong enough. Though on that note, if your storage chest does break, thankfully the items will stay on the ground for quite a while. I tested it by coming back an hour later and still found my loot intact. Though I don't think it is permanent, it might eventually disappear, so keep that in mind. Crafting progression is typical. You refine materials, unlock better tools, and move from stone to iron to steel. Though I will say the improvement is noticeable and satisfying. The early game does drag quite a bit, but once you hit level 10 and unlock all the different stations, getting to that next tier will be a piece of cake. Though I will say some item grinds are pretty bad, especially in the early game, such as wanting to get the bone armor, which requires like 30 to 50 bones per piece, and the enemies early on don't drop that many. You'll be lucky to get maybe 5 or even less than that. Though eventually you can get skill points in order to increase the bone yield, and then eventually you'll get tools that will increase the bone yield as well, so it won't be that bad later on, but considering bone armor is the starting armor, you kind of want it now and not later where you can get it easier. And as for the farming, it works fine. You plant what you want, wait, and then harvest. But I will say that sometimes I will notice that crops randomly vanish or despawn mid-growth, which can be frustrating. I don't know if it's a bug or if it was part of the system that I just didn't realize, but it only happened a couple of times. Now then, when it does grow up, you do have a limited amount of time to harvest, or else at that point the crop will die. Overall, for the building, crafting, and farming, I'm gonna go ahead and rate it a 3 out of 5. It's pretty standard, it works most of the time, it's just not really that innovative. The PvE combat is really not that good. You have basic attack animations with no real weight to the hits, and most fights will boil down to who hits the bigger numbers faster. Your strength will scale with gear and your level, of course, but combat never really feels dynamic. You can, of course, get stealth attacks, which are fun, by sneaking around and using your bow, kind of like, you know, any other RPG game where you do the stealth sniper, getting that Skyrim vibe, and it will do a kill cam when you do get a one-shot kill, which is, again, pretty fun. I also kind of liked the throwing of the spears, which I didn't really use bows or guns that much. I kind of liked throwing spears way better, which will also do that kill animation. But other than that, the enemy variety is limited. I mostly just kind of found wolves and bears in the forest, even in the snow biomes, which in the desert you will find more variety of alien-like creatures, as well as hyenas and lions. You can also find various types of worm creatures in the caves. There are bosses that exist out in the world, but it doesn't fundamentally change the formula of the combat when it comes to the bosses. So for that, PvE is going to be a 2 out of 5. Now, for the overall story, I normally do my story delivery versus how it's written. I'm not going to be able to really talk about how it's written because it seems to me that the story is all locked behind DLC. When I unlocked the mission board, basically, I opened it up and I tried to do story missions, but it said I needed DLC in order to access them, and I can only do the generic missions. So I really don't know if I am going to rate this because of that. On one hand, it should be rated low because the story is essentially paywalled, but on the other hand, I didn't get to see the story, so I don't know if it's good or not. So I think I'm just gonna give it a 2 out of 5 for the fact that it is paywalled, but it's not really going to be telling you how well the story is because I didn't get to experience it. On that same note, for the updates and activity of this game, now to the credit, the devs have supported Icarus with steady updates. They've added new gear features, and even a ocean-based map recently, or really just an island-based map, but it's all paid DLC, and that's the catch. Most of these big updates and a bunch of maps and other gameplay mechanics are all locked off with a paywall. So yeah, while the base game has improved in some ways, it feels like the majority of the game is all paywalled off, even though you've already paid for the game. So with that, I'm gonna say it is a 3 out of 5 for this section because yes, they are updating it, but you have to pay for the updates. When it comes to the lag and bugs, the performance has gotten a lot better since the launch days. You will see occasional stutters, but it is generally smooth and stable. I never had any crashes or game-breaking bugs during my session, so I am going to rate this a 4 out of 5 because it is overall solid. Now then, my overall score for Icarus is a mixed bag. I am going to rate it a 2.9 out of 5. I do like the basic crafting progression that the game does have, even though it can be a bit of a grind early on. I do like the dynamic fauna and a good amount of flora to find as well. Really, what I don't like about this game, behind the excessive amount of paid DLC, is that the world feels really empty with no real exploration. The combat is weak, the world itself feels very narrow, the lack of tutorial, early grinding at the start of the game, and overall it was just kind of a mixed bag for me personally, because at times I would kind of enjoy myself and I would play, while other times I just kind of felt bored. Like, it wasn't enough to really make me quit, but at the same time it really wasn't enough to make me feel hooked. So yeah, this is a mixed bag of a game from my perspective. You might have a different perspective, so I would say this game is a definite try if it's on sale kind of game. But until then, I hope you enjoyed this review. I know it's kind of a weird review because this is kind of an offshoot game that I kind of just tried for the review purposes, and it took me a while to review it because of the long grind, especially in that early game. I didn't even start writing this until I got to the mid-game. Not to mention, half of this review was not even scripted. I kind of went off the bat for some of this, which is maybe why it sounds a little bit weird, because a lot of this is literally just me talking. I have no script whatsoever, which is unusual for my... Okay, I'm ranting now, god dang it. Anyway, I will see you guys in the next review. Florida Gator Man out. And that is the end of this video. If you enjoyed this review, make sure to subscribe. I'll be diving into more in-depth reviews of open-world sandbox RPG games, including ones no one ever talk about, buried deep in the darkest corners of Steam. Some of them even look like the muck at the bottom of my pond. For pure gameplay content, check out my second channel, Excalligator Gaming, where I post full narrated playthroughs, funny shorts, and streams. Do you have a game that you think I should cover next? Drop it in the comments below. Florida Gator Man out.